Before bedtime rolled around, we could hear the distant thunder and see flashes of lightning. My 4 brothers and 3 sisters and I knew that a rainstorm was almost certain. We always said our nightly prayers together, and each of us gave our father a goodnight kiss before we climbed up the stairs to our bedrooms. Our rooms were usually warm during those summer evenings, but with the windows open you could feel a cool breeze begin to blow and lower the temperature. We could hear the night sounds of the noisy crickets and frogs that came to our ears from the woods behind our home. One could feel the tension of the coming storm as the thunder became louder and the streaks of lightning flashed across the darkened sky. The rain would begin to fall and gather momentum, and in a while would slow down to a steady pitter-patter as the drops hit on the steep slanting metal roof. A 50-gallon wooden barrel would catch most of the rain. Dad would get up out of bed and turn the water into the cistern. When Dad came back to bed, the troubles of the day would somehow be forgotten. The sound of the rain hitting the old tin roof would lull you off to sleep in a short time. We all felt secure under our shelter and do not remember it having any leaks during all those years of growing up. Small towns across America, places like Duxbury, Worcester, South Hadley, Silver Grove, Melbourne, Hebron, Carmel, Yakima, Natick, and Andover. It was a very peaceful time. My mom died when I was 6 years old. When I turned 15, I got my first job at the local drugstore. Dad had sent me to pay for some medicine, and the druggist asked me, "Are you working anywhere?" I said, "Heck no, it's the Depression days. You know, 1936. The druggist said, "Would you like to work here for $1 per day?" Gee whiz, that was the going pay for adults at that time. Heck yes. I worked there for 5 years. Then I got a job with the railroad as a clerk, and one of my brothers worked there as a conductor with my best friend Buddy. My hometown had many homes and buildings with metal roofs. Our neighbor's metal roof was old and rusty. And our home was boarded up and left standing to be overgrown with bushes after Dad built a new house on the back part of our lot. It was getting close to Christmas, 1941. My dad now worked at the big concrete plant close to our new home. St. Philip's Church, where we attended Mass, was a short walk from our new home. It was a cold December day as the sun slowly rose into the sky. Buddy and I were hiking out into the woods behind the house. early Sunday morning, December 7th, 1941. We were going on our weekly target shoot. We'd get up real early and shoot some target before attending Mass Sunday morning.
Hey Elmer, I got these paper plates from Mom's house, painted the red X on them. Do a little target practice with them.
That's great. It's better than shooting at bottles and cans.
Elmer, does this look like a good place to tack it up against this tree right here?
Yeah, that looks perfect.
We're going to have some fun. Elmer, I'm pacing off 25 yards to the target so we can zero it in perfect.
Buddy, Ted Williams hitting 400 this batting season was really great considering the fact he chipped a bone in his right foot sliding into second base in that exhibition game.
Ted Williams is going to be one of the best baseball players in history.
I think you're right. How about that Chicago game where Ted hit 2 gigantic home runs against Rigney's high fastballs?
The wind must have been with Ted that day at Comiskey Park. That must have been over 500 feet when he hit that home run.
How about Ted hitting that game-winning home run in the All-Star game in Detroit? That All-Star game was as exciting as the World Series. People went wild when Ted won the All-Star game for the Red Sox in the American League. Ted hitting 400 this season is too bad the Red Sox came in second place.
Yeah, it'd been nice to see the Red Sox go all the way.
With all this going on in Europe, with the Germans fighting everybody, you think we'll be at war soon to help the British?
I don't know. Only President Roosevelt would know that.
I'm sure glad my dad let me buy this .22 for $4.75. Pretty nice gun. Let's see who's a better target shooter. You want to go first?
Yeah, I can't wait.
Whoa, that was a good shot, buddy. You got right near the bullseye. Buddy, that's pretty darn good. I don't know if I can beat you.
Here you go, Elmer, your turn. Let's see how you can do with it.
I don't know if I can beat you, buddy. That's pretty darn good shooting.
You never know. That's a good gun.
Ooh, I got it right next to one of your shots.
Oh, no.
I got 2 more shots.
Uh-oh. Another nice shot.
That was a bad shot for me. That hit low and to the right. It was almost as far away as your first shot on the target. Let's try another target and see if I can do better. I think we were about equal on that one.
Well, Elmer, it looks like a draw. We're going to have us another shoot-off.
Okay, we're going to have to hurry because I got to go to Mass before I go to work today.
Okay.
Go put another target up.
Okay, buddy, you put up that other target with the red circle on it, and let's finish off who's the best shooter here.
1 shot each. Whoever's the closest in the center of that red dot is the winner. Buddy, it looks like I just barely beat you today.
Elmer, I don't know if I'm ever going to beat that. We're just going to have to call you Deadeye.
Well, I've got to go to Mass before I see you at the railroad yard. Where are you going today?
I'll see you at work. I'm going to take a short trip to Cincinnati.
Okay.
It's almost time for Mass. I wonder when Elmer's coming home.
Hi, Dad. It sure is cold outside.
Elmer, did you put your .22 rifle in the shed out back?
Yeah, Dad, of course I did. I know you don't want it here in the house around the kids. It's almost time for Mass. I'm sorry I'm late getting in, but I beat Buddy at target shooting.
Yes, son, I got some bad news. Just came on the radio saying that Pearl Harbor's been bombed by the Japanese.
Well, Dad, I guess that means I'm going to be going to war. I'm going to go by the enlistment center tomorrow and try to get into the service. I'm going to get ready for Mass now, and then I'll go to work and tell Buddy what's happened. I don't think he's heard about it yet. Hey, Buddy! Buddy, you up there? Buddy, you in there?
Rush, what is it?
Buddy, the Pearl Harbor was attacked yesterday, and the FBI just called. They said Don't let any Germans or Japanese on the train because they're afraid of sabotage.
With the attack on Pearl Harbor and the war going on in Europe, I think it's best to check to make sure there's not any sabotage going on the train.
Buddy, where are you making this run to?
We're going to Cincinnati, and we'll be back tomorrow.
I'm going to get out and try to enlist when you get back tomorrow. You going to go with me?
Yeah, I can't wait. I'll be there with you.
Ted Williams is already enlisted and he's training to be a Marine pilot.
The Red Sox just lost a good player.
I'll see you tomorrow when you get back from Cincinnati and we'll go down and enlist. Have a safe trip.
So if you would please, get your tickets out, get fares please. Okay.
Buddy got back from his trip to Cincinnati and we went to take the trolley to the federal building to enlist. We stopped by my cousin's home, Ray Timur, to see if he would enlist with us. Ray's mom said no, she needed him at home, which she did. I had told Buddy we should join the Navy because the druggist I had worked for as a teenager said the Navy fed you better and you had better living conditions. I thought too much water, but other than that, it would be all right. Buddy and I got to the federal building and there was a big long line. We got tired of waiting and said, "To heck with this." Buddy and I went over to the line for the Marines. Do we look like Marines? We were just little guys from a small town. The Marines had a bigger, longer line and it was not moving, so we went back home and continued with our railroad jobs for the next year until our draft notices came in the mail. Buddy and I got the notice the same day, October 1st, 1942, and my brother and cousin got theirs a week later. Today, the Army Air Corps was shipping me out on a train to Atlantic City, New Jersey for boot camp. Buddy and my brother Amos had one more trip to do for the railroad, and then they would follow. I took one last look at the big city near where we lived and thought it could be a long time before I returned if I survived the war. The train station was a massive building of some of the most beautiful architecture I had ever seen. The building had an enormous American flag in the lobby and a historical mural painted near the ceiling.
Ticket to Atlantic City, please. Thanks.
The train's engineer was a friend from work, and a couple other fellows worked on this run to Atlantic City that I knew. The train passed through a wooded area and the trees had their colorful fall foliage. The train also took me past a concrete company where Dad was at work, and he would wave at me passing by.
There's my dad. Hey, Dad! See you, Dad! Probably never see him again. I'll probably die in combat.
I passed my home and friends and neighbors' homes. Saw St. Philip's Church and headed into the unknown of what the future would bring. I had an idea as a kid if I ever got in a war, I would not come out alive. The next few weeks of Army life were so different from the average way of life. Awaken very early, make your bed, shave, and shower. Eat breakfast, then march for miles. Drill for 50 minutes and rest 10. After that, you started all over again. We were all lonesome and wished we were back home. We marched on the famous boardwalk in Atlantic City, New Jersey. We passed fancy hotels now used by the soldiers, and on rainy days, we marched inside the convention center. This is where the famous Miss America pageant took place every September. One of the duties I had to do at boot camp was pick up cigarette butts, which I didn't care for at all because I was not a smoker. There was one young fellow on the same train I came up on that was tall and thin, but his face showed signs of being too young to be in the Army. It turned out he was only 14 years old and had lied about his age when he enlisted. Of course, the Army had to discharge him. I received a letter from my brother Amos telling of his discharge. He had written that he'd had trouble with his feet from marching.
When he was a very young boy, he had an injury to one of his toes and it was amputated. The Army was wrong to have taken him in the service because it was his balance toe. But I was glad that he'd gotten discharged. We had our graduation day and lots of family came up to see us graduate from boot camp, and then we were on to more training.
Good morning, gentlemen. I'm Major Mike Sadauskas, and welcome to Laredo, Texas. You men will be going through 200 hours of intensive gunnery training during your stay here. And do not think that you will have the opportunity to sightsee in town and visit with the locals, because it is my expectation that you will spend your spare time studying. One of the things that you will need to improve upon is identifying the difference between friendly and enemy aircraft. For instance, here is a drawing of a Messerschmitt Bf-109. You will notice that it looks very similar to our P-51 Mustang. We will not be shooting down friendly aircraft after I get done training you.
The event that happened on May 18, 1943 is one that I had looked forward to for many years, my first ride in an airplane. In the late 1920s and into the 1930s, a small airplane near where I grew up would always fly over our home. The pilot was Albert Byers. We used to watch him as long as we could see the plane. I wondered what must it be like to look down on the earth. Now my dream would be fulfilled. The AT-6 is a small plane with only 2 seats. The pilot was in the front while I had the rear seat. The pilot taxied out towards the runway. We had to wait until another plane cleared the area. He made a decent landing, then applied his brakes, and the plane's nose went down and the tail stood straight up. No one was hurt, and it was quite a while until the wreck was cleared. Then it was our turn to take off. This was a rather bad start for my first flight, but I was still eager to get up into the air. As we raced down the runway at full speed, I began to wonder if we'd ever leave the ground, and suddenly we were airborne. It was better than I had imagined. Seeing the land looked like quilts. To see the tiny cars and trains and small houses, everything was beautiful.
Traffic Rise 5, Fox November, turn into left base 6.
Down here in Laredo, Texas, it sure was hot and dry. You had to drink plenty of water all the time. We spent a month and a half at gunner school. Gunner training was interesting. We ran over a lot of rattlesnakes on the way out to the training range. The first guys to drive out to the range had to shoot their guns to try to scare off the rattlesnakes, or they'd just kill them. The only ones I seen on the road to the gunnery range were dead. I was sure glad. I always hated snakes from an inch and a half long up to full grown from one end to the other. I never did like snakes. Gunner training was for the 50 calibers that we would have on board the B-17s. We had to learn how to take them apart and clean them, and if they ever got jammed on a mission, we had to be real fast at unjamming the gun and knowing what was wrong with it. We started out shooting at targets on the ground, and then they would take us up in an AT-6 and you'd shoot into the slipstream. It was pretty tough. The first time I went up, I wasn't very good at hitting the target. So from then on, the pilot would get as close to the target as he could to help me out at hitting it.
Gentlemen, I think this might be a good opportunity for us to discuss again what my expectations are for you during this training. You are too busy to be playing practical jokes. I do not want to hear again that we've put a dead rattlesnake under another airman's cot. You almost gave poor Cadet Rushman a heart attack.
Now that gunnery school was finished, we boarded a troop transport plane and flew up to Cutbank, Montana. It was cold and snowy up in Cutbank, quite a vast difference from the heat and desert-like conditions at gunnery school in Laredo, Texas. Before our first flight and training in the B-17, we were told all about our bomber inside and out and the crew positions. One of our mechanics briefed us on the engines, and then we got our first look inside the B-17. Your life raft, if needed, is stored in the bomb bay area. My radio compartment was behind the bomb bay. Position reports and keeping records of all orders transmitted to our aircraft was my responsibility. If we have to do a water landing with our B-17 being too shot up to get back to base, then we would all assemble in the radio room, and after landing, we would eject the top window, put the raft in the water, and climb out of our crippled B-17.
Here's the controls to plug in your heated suit, because it's going to be up to 50 degrees below zero.
Now it was time for us to go up for our first training mission in the B-17. We were going to go to 10,000 feet and drop smoke bombs on the target. September 12, 1943, Cutbank, Montana. Our practice today was to let the pilot learn the bombardier's job in case of an emergency. We had the pilot, a different co-pilot, not our own, the navigator, the bombardier, assistant engineer, and myself were the only ones in the aircraft. The rest of the crew remained on the ground. While the pilot was in the nose, dropping smoke bombs on the target area, the plane was flying on automatic pilot. The assistant engineer sat in the pilot's seat. Everything was going okay. The bomb bay doors were open, and I could watch the results of the bombing.
The squadron's at 10,000 feet, and now they're on their bombing run.
After the pilot dropped one of the bombs, I heard him say, "Give it a hard left." Our plane almost upset. We flew in a circle for a few seconds and then went into a spiral dive.
Got one out of the high squadron. Yep. No chance there.
I put my parachute on and waited for the word to bail out, but no one spoke. The turns became tighter, and I knew it was time to go.
That was Russia's plane that just lost control and went to a spiral death dive. Come on, guys, pull up!
I was standing right in front of the bomb bay door, the earth and sky reeling before my eyes. My feet were glued to the floor. I knew we were going to die.
Pull up! Pull up!
The pressure was so bad, I even put my hands under my knees trying to pry my feet from the floor. They didn't come up.
I could see my young life before me, my funeral, my family, and loved one. There was no way out, and I was calm, just resigned to death. We'd begun to pull up a little. I watched as the wings were bending, and it seemed they would tear off. I even hollered to them, "Hang on! Oh, hang on!"
All right, good job. You made it out of it.
I wondered if I had enough height to overcome our fall to earth, as we were very close by now. The pilot knew what went wrong and hastened back to his position. When we went into the spiral dive, his back was held to the floor, the same as my feet were. He could not reach the necessary switches to get manual control, but he told the co-pilot what to do, and they managed to bring us out of the spin and give us a new lease on life. Another crew had seen us as we sped towards Earth and called for the ambulances. We wouldn't have had any use for such a thing. We would have been scattered all over the hills of Montana. Someone very special must have been with us that day. I told my bombardier pilot and co-pilot that I would have lived a millisecond longer than they would have, being in the nose of the plane. Someone that day was going to have to answer to Major Mike Sadowskis in our debriefing about what happened on that almost fatal spiral death dive.
As you men have all heard by now, Lieutenant Razor's crew barely survived a spiral death dive. Lieutenant Razor was with the bombardier practicing a bombing run when he told the co-pilot to bank to the left. The co-pilot blanked the plane too hard to the left and forced the B-17 into a spiral dive. Lieutenant Razor was instructing him over the intercom on how to recover, but it took them 6,800 feet of lost altitude to regain control of the plane. Cutbank being at 3,000 feet above sea level, you can see they regained control with only 200 feet to spare. That was too close. We are assigning Lieutenant Cesarini from Brooklyn to Lieutenant Razor's crew. The co-pilot that pulled them out of this death dive will not be flying B-17s anymore.
None of us could remember the co-pilot's name that pulled us out of the spiral death dive that day. Our new co-pilot replacing him was a big fella. His name was Gus Cesarini. He was from Brooklyn, New York. The first time Gus entered a B-17, he came from the back part of the plane and up past my radio position and asked me where to go now, and I said, right through there where the bomb bay is. Gus said, I can't get through there. He did finally make it through the bomb bay, and Gus said, I'm never coming this way anymore. Well, we had to do plenty of takeoffs and landings and bombing runs and flights and continued training because they didn't want to lose a crew of 10 men on a training mission.
Gentlemen, I need your complete and undivided attention. What we're going to talk about now is literally a matter of life or death. Frankly, the taxpayers have spent far too much money training you to have you killed or your aircraft destroyed in senseless training accidents. There have been far too many men that have been killed in this training. I know you're still new at your job. However, we've had B-17s collide while practicing formation flight. You all must become extremely proficient at formation flying. When you are in combat over France and Germany, being able to fly in formation and to maximize the use of all of the guns in that formation will save your life in combat. Some aircraft have crashed into mountains at nighttime. Again, an unforgivable accident. And just last week we had a B-17 collide into a fuel truck crossing the runway, killing everyone on board. Gentlemen, if we're going to make it to England to fight the Germans, all of us are going to have to do better.
Now that our crew had finished our flight training in Cutbank, Montana, and we'd gotten through our specialty training, mine being radio, which I thought I'd never learn the Morse code until I thought my head was going to burst, and then I was going to go crazy, and then all of a sudden you just get the Morse code. Well, we'd finished all of our training, and Major Mike Sadowskis and I were headed off to Blue Ash, Ohio now for my specialty training in combat film school.
Elmer, we're here at the Combat Camera School in Blue Ash, Ohio. We're going to train you in using a 35mm bomb spotting Bell & Howell handheld film camera. These cameras can be either mounted or handheld to film bomb runs, post-bomb runs, and combat footage. Elmer, you're going to be using a combination of black and white film and the newly developed color film. Your B-17 is always going to be the first one to land after a mission, so we can quickly develop the film and assess the success of the bomb runs. Not only are you going to be the radio man on each mission, you will be the combat cameraman filming again, both in black and white and in color film. Once you've finished your training here in Blue Ash, where we also have the P-51s and B-25s, you're going to be going to Rickenbacker Field and film an air-powered display of P-51s and B-25s, B-17s, and British Liberators on bomb runs, so that we can determine that you've mastered the combat film footage. Do you understand what your training will entail?
Yes, sir. Thank you for the opportunity, Major Sadowskis.
Good luck to you, Elmer, and I hope to see you again.
In Blue Ash, we were living in two-man tents. My tent mate wrote a lot of letters home just as I did. One day I was getting up to go send my letter off to home, and he said, "Would you take my letter along?" And I says, "Well, where are you from?" And he told me, and it was a small town right near where I grew up. He said, "My name's Bob Hildebrand, and my property lines join your Uncle Joe Rushman's. We tried to get assigned to the same crew, but we're told if two men went down from the same area, it was bad publicity. So we never saw each other again after combat film training, and later on I would learn that he was shot down and killed in the war."
What else you might like is a film for this. Sealed like a Christmas turkey.
Oh, wow. So that's a
there's
film can.
They did a lot of that where you know, they put a key in a pull tab.
Yeah.
Again, like a Christmas turkey.
Yeah.
They taught us how to use different types of cameras and how to mount cameras in the fighters and the bombers. Some of the cameras were handheld cameras, and others were large cameras that were mounted in the fighters and the bombers. Then they took us out to the airfield, and we had to shoot film of fast-moving P-51 Mustangs and the B-25 bomber, which was the fastest bomber. The B-25 had an 8-man crew on board, but it was only a twin engine, and it was very small and sleek and fast-moving. It was real hard to get used to filming these two fast-moving aircraft. The B-25 Mitchell was also the same aircraft that had been used on the Doolittle raid right after Pearl Harbor. Because the B-25 was such a small bomber, they called it the Flying Coffin. The P-51 was a newly developed fighter plane that could fly at over 400 miles per hour. It was the fastest fighter that the U.S. government had, and it could put drop tanks on it. It had the longest fuel range of any fighter, so it could guide us on our B-17 missions no matter how long they were. We had fighter support the whole way. After reviewing the film that I shot at Blue Ash Camera School, Major Sadowskis said I had the steadiest camera shot of any of the soldiers at Blue Ash. I was then ordered to Rickenbacker Field to film the air power display. After seeing the P-51's performance at Blue Ash, I felt that this could be a turning point in the war. We finally had a fighter that could compete with the Luftwaffe's fighters. I flew a C-47 from Blue Ash Film School to the air power display at Rickenbacker Field. The commander of the Tuskegee Airmen of the 332nd Fighter Wing arrived in a staff car from Alabama. The base had half-tracks, jeeps, tanks, and the 101st Airborne guarding against spies and sabotage. There were more officers than I had ever seen in one place. Some of the bombers and P-51s were taxiing out to take off and begin the display of American firepower. There were plenty of support, ground crews, and maintenance men on hand to take care of any problems that might arise. Some of the P-51s were fitted with drop tanks which gave them a longer fuel range. The 6 50-caliber machine guns carried 1,880 rounds of ammunition. The Red Tail flyby was a display of the skills of the black airmen from their base in Tuskegee, Alabama. The P-51 had a powerful V-1650 Merlin engine. Its speed and maneuverability would make for a severe test for the Luftwaffe pilots. As well as being an escort for bombers, the P-51s were equally capable of strafing ground targets like the P-47 Jug and the P-38 Lightnings. With the 101st Airborne and all their firepower on hand, there was no worries of any enemy, spies, or sabotage taking place. After filming the air power display, I returned to Cutbank, Montana on a B-17, the Yankee Lady, and my crew now ready for our trip overseas. October 7, 1943, Colonel Hatcher, who would be our first commander at Polebrook, England, inspected the troops, and we were ready to head for England. We were finished our training and ready for combat, and I thought I would never come back alive. From Cutbank, Montana, we flew to Scott Field, located near St. Louis. Finally, we would be headed on to England after many weather delays, and there was too many troops going over the seas that they could not handle them all. From Scott Field, we went to Syracuse, New York, and then our last stop in the United States was Bangor, Maine. Hey guys, listen up, I've got Axis Sally on the radio.
Welcome all you new flyboys who just arrived in England. Our German U-boats spotted you crossing the Atlantic. Sorry you were held up in Newfoundland for 17 days because you missed Clark Gable, who is now safely at home in the States while you boys won't be going home again. Now, back to the soothing sounds of Tom Doherty's orchestra.
When we landed in England, we should have gone to a field called Deanthorpe. This field was not ready for us yet, so we landed at Polebrook. This field's group came over in April 1943 and already seen a lot of combat out of Polebrook. In a few days, we were told that 34 crews of the 401st Bomb Group were transferred to the 351st. Our crew was one of them. We were lucky to be in a barracks with 7 other crews that we knew real well. A lot of the barracks had names on them. I was assigned to plain old number 14 barracks. They were a lot more comfortable than sleeping in a tent or a foxhole like the infantry had to.
So this is Polebrook. We finally got here. It's the only airport base in England with a paved runway, concrete runway. I've never seen so many guys before at boot camp. They had to put some of us up in those hotels across the street from the barracks. There wasn't enough barrack space for us. And can you believe those guys were jumping off the hotel to their deaths? I feel so bad for their families that they were willing to just commit suicide rather than take a chance and go through combat and possibly survive the war.
And that was really strange. We was in KP peeling potatoes, and that jumper jumped right past the window.
Yeah, there's quite a few guys that jumped to their deaths while we were at boot camp. Well, we sure have seen some incredible things there. When we were stuck in Newfoundland for 17 days, those 2 fighter planes collided, and that one pilot bailed out and he landed right next to us. And then when we were getting ready to take off for England, that B-24 cut in front of us, and he rolled down the runway and hit that Jeep the guy was crossing the runway in and killed the driver of the Jeep.
I'm sure must have done some damage to that B-24's landing gear when they hit.
Yeah, I heard on the radio the control tower told them to just go around and land at another airport in Canada because they didn't want to hold us up any longer. There's so many B-17s and B-24s that were headed for Europe.
Rush, after takeoff, did you see that guy jump out of that B-17 into the Atlantic Ocean?
I sure did. Can't believe, what was that guy thinking, you know, as he plunged into the cold, dark Atlantic Ocean? He had his second thoughts. There's no way they could come back and rescue him.
I can't believe the drill instructor took your Red Sox hat.
Yeah, he's probably a Yankees fan. At least we can listen to the Red Sox on WWII out of Boston. Let's go back inside and listen to some more of the music.
We were told that we might be in combat in a few days. We would watch the planes in the early mornings as they left and count the ones that came back. Some were not damaged, but some returned with engines out, large holes in the fuselage, men injured or dead. Believe me, it would make you think of what could happen because our turn was coming soon. Came on the 26th of November. Bremen was the target, with my mother's hometown as the secondary. From the time I went into the Army Air Corps, I thought that this might be a possibility that I might have to bomb her hometown, but I didn't expect it would be my first mission. 4 more times our crew was briefed to bomb Oldenburg, and each time, 5 in all, the mission was called off or something happened that I never had to do this to her hometown that she left when she was a young woman. After we were in the air, we could not find our group. We flew for quite a while and could not find any of the J's on the tail. We returned to Polebrook, and I'm sure our pilot, Lieutenant Razor, was going to catch holy heck.
Boy, buddy, they sure gave Razor holy heck for the fact he couldn't find the squadron. I had a feeling we'd be sent to bomb my mother's hometown of Oldenburg, Germany, but not on our first mission.
It's a good thing Razor couldn't find our squadron and we had to abort. I've never seen so many B-17s in the air at one time.
Well, there's no radio contact allowed during the mission, and Razor just could not spot any of the J's on the tails of all those B-17s.
We can't just go with the other squadron like they told us to. They could have been on a long mission and we could have run out of fuel.
The squadron commanders don't care if you don't come back. As they said, they have plenty of crews to replace us and nobody will miss us.
Sort of makes you feel like you're not important.
Buddy, this is quite a nice estate that the Rothschilds let the Americans have for a base here in Polebrook. It's got all these woods here. It's so peaceful, you'd never know there's a war going on. Did you know that Jimmy Doolittle is flying B-17 missions out of Polebrook?
You mean the same officer that flew the B-25 raid on Tokyo off the Hornet right after Pearl Harbor?
Yes, and also Major Paul Tibbets is flying here out of Polebrook. His crew thinks he's great. I have a feeling Tibbets will be involved in something great before the war is over.
Yeah, Major Tibbets is done flying the B-17s. He just got signed the new B-29 in the Pacific Theater. Here, Elmer, you read Henry's letter. I can't read his writing. Use this knife you gave me for Christmas.
Okay. Henry's the guy you know real well from your runs to Cincinnati on the train. He works for American Airlines, doesn't he, there at Lunken Airport? I guess he's based in Italy there with his B-17 crew. Henry says, "Hi, Buddy and Elmer. Just saw Clark Gable and Gone with the Wind from the 4th time. What a great movie. Our missions out of Italy have seen lots of flak but no enemy fighters. The Tuskegee Airmen do a great job escorting us. My boss at American Airlines wrote and told me that we may move from Lunken to the air base in northern Kentucky after the war, so we will have more land to expand on our operations. Also, Lunken is being so low-lying next to the Ohio River, it gets lots of fog and is flooded more than once. Are you guys rationing? We get certain amounts of necessities like beer and cigarettes each week. I don't smoke, so I trade my smokes for beer. Warm beer is better than no beer. Hope you guys make it through your missions and we can all return home to our families. Take care, and I'll write again soon. Henry." That's interesting. Those Tuskegee Airmen must be some incredible pilots, and they're flying those P-51s out of Italy, guiding them on their missions. Well, I wish we didn't see any enemy fighters. They're tearing us up. That last mission we lost 68 B-17s. There was over 75 enemy fighters attacking us. Man, that's 680 men went down on one mission. Well, okay.
Let's make a toast.
Let's toast to a happier new year, because our first 2 months here, we lost 5 crew in our barracks on that sad mission last month when they were on fire and 5 of them bailed out too low to the ground and were killed. And Colonel Hatcher, the best commander we had, was shot down, and he and his crew are now in Stalag Luft 3 as prisoners of war. So let's toast to a happier new year. I hope we get our missions over quick this new year. Well, we better go to bed because they're going to be waking us up at 3 o'clock in the morning for our mission. Have a good new year, buddy. See you in the morning.
Good night.
Breakfast at 3, briefing at 4.
Okay, man. For security's sake, anyone know what the target is for today? Saint Nazaire? Brussels?
Paris.
Oh, we'll see. All right, Sergeant.
Sprechen Sie Deutsch?
This was the longest penetration for this group. We've got an A+ target over here. We've got to get it today.
Okay, gentlemen. Stations are at 5:05. Start engines 6:05.
Taxi at 6:15. Takeoff 6:30. Got it? That's all. Okay, man, let's go get this turret and then we'll take the jet.
My crew was on a pass for the December 31st raid. Our group lost 7 planes that day, a very bad mission. Not one of the planes returned to the base. The ones that came back to England landed at any base they could find. Our group commander, Hatcher, was shot down. We lost a great leader. Bender's crew, who also shared our barracks, was one of 2 crews now lost out of our 8 crews barracks. That's a 25% loss, and we are here in combat for just 5 weeks. One of the men from Bender's crew was sick that morning, and when his crewmates did not return, he was lost. He wandered around like a lost puppy. He would have rather have been with them than to be alone. In time, he had to move out of our barracks due to another crew moving in. Adamak and Bender's crew had lived at the opposite end of the barracks from us. Bender was on his 5th raid when they were shot down. After they were replaced and the replacement crew had completed their 4th raid, some of the fellows told them to beware of the next raid. Sure enough, the crew was shot down and replaced. This next crew again was shot down on their 5th mission, and this is 3 crews that were lost on their 5th mission. You can bet no one out of the barracks wanted to move into their spot. The next crew broke the jinx, although they are in store for some close calls. The P-47 Thunderbolt, also known as Jug, was one of our primary escort fighter planes that would protect us on our missions. One mission I saw a B-17 that had an engine fire, number 4 engine, and is being attacked by German fighters. 4 of our P-47s prevented him from being shot down, and the plane returned safely to Polebrook.
Fighters, 3 o'clock low. Watch it. That should be our escort. You're right, sir. 47s. Pilot to crew, over enemy coast. On the ball, you guys. Hey, get a load of that flag. Can't that hold any higher than that? Where do you want to have it, in the bomb bay? Why don't you lean out and smell it? Okay, here they are. 9 o'clock high, enemy fighters. Level. 2 more at 5. Watch it. Get that one at 3. High. Level. No, he's going low. Here he comes up. Wingman, smoking on number 4. He's going out and down. Check the chute, you guys. One chute out of the tail. 2 out of the waist. Another 2 boys out of the nose. That's 2 more. Pilot to tail. Pilot to tail. Let me know how they're doing back there. Roger. Fighter, 6 o'clock. Coming through. high. Somebody got one of them on the button. That Jerry pilot bailed out. He's not walking away from it. Two more coming through. 5 o'clock. Shorty's been hitting feather number 4. Cover him all you can, everybody. Pilot to left waist. Pilot to left waist. There's another one working Shorty over. Can you help him? No can do, sir. Out of range. Did a fighter or a flak get that ship? Flak, I think. All right, Steve. We're on the IP. She's yours. I got her. Bombay doors open. Make a good run now, Steve. I'm on it.
We were racking up the missions in early 1944. We flew missions to many different places. Ludwigshafen, Germany. We bombed factories. We bombed in northern France, right on the English Channel, in the Pas-de-Calais area, the rocket installations, which would later be used to fly buzz bombs to hit London. We did several missions in a row to Frankfurt, Germany, to bomb factories there. On one mission to the factories at Brunswick, Germany, I saw 2 B-17s blow up. Sometimes if a B-17 blew up right next to you, the debris from the exploding plane could damage your plane enough to make your B-17 go down.
Pilot to crew. Pilot to crew. Well, you guys, we're over an hour out. They haven't come back at us yet. Looks like we're lucky this trip. Enemy fighters. 11 o'clock high. Another 1 o'clock high. Coming level to 3.
if we passed by on our bombing mission, the German fighter pilots would re-land at their fighter bases and get their aircraft reloaded, refueled, take a break, and wait for us to come back from the bombing run, and then they'd come back up and shoot us up all over again. So we could get attacked on the way to the target and on the way back home to base in England. Helmeted crew, 4 German fighters pulling up to the middle group's altitude.
All die amerikanischen B-17 fliegende Festungen. Ja, Hans hat gerade noch eine fliegende Festung abgeschossen.
That German fighter pilot just said, "Look at all the B-17 flying fortresses," and another fighter pilot just said, "Hans just shot down another fortress. They're getting ready to attack the middle group. That's the 401st Bomb Squadron."
Elmer, if you can, tell that fighter pilot that I just got Hans.
Oh, there's a P-51 pulling up. One of our little friends. He's here to save us. He shot down the 4th German fighter. I don't think the other 3 realize that he's there. And the 2nd fighter. Oh, he just got the 3rd one. Now he's in a big dogfight with that remaining fighter. They're headed for the deck. We had no idea which one won the dogfight because we were at 30,000 feet. We saw a big explosion on the deck. And then a little while later, our little friend came back up to our squadron level and wagged his wings at us in victory.
ME at 2 o'clock. I got him. I'll say you did. He isn't bailing out either. Another 110 at 10 o'clock. He's yours, kid. There he goes. Here's my pigeon. Sure do. I'll confirm him all right.
After we had completed a lot of missions in January and early February, there was some bad weather over the continent of Europe, and so we had to stand down on the base. When they had a stand down, they'd usually bring in some entertainment, like the USO tour with Bob Hope, or a big band like the Tom Doherty Orchestra. That's what they had going on in Hangar 1 tonight. But before the concert tonight, Buddy and I was going to take a couple of barmaids on a canoe trip.
Buddy, let's go change our clothes and take those barmaids out on the Nine River canoeing.
Yeah, Rush, that'd be fun. That redhead had nerves of steel. I think her name was Martha. And that blonde, I think her name was Pat. What do you think?
Last night when we were eating at the pub and that buzz bomb flew over and blew up nearby, you asked Martha if we should go to the bomb shelter, and she said, "Eat your dinner, Yanks. That one was 2 blocks away."
I'll canoe with the funny last Pat. She said you look like the big movie star Clark Gable. You have ears just like him, you know.
70 miles north of London, where Polebrook was, had no evidence of a war going on. We could tour the countryside, go canoeing, drink at the local pub. Our war was far different than the soldiers on the ground. Well, buddy, let's get back to base and go to that big band performance tonight, the Tom Doherty Orchestra.
Ooh, I'm gonna get wet. This is nice. Those fighter pilots are always showing off when we're on stand down and they bring a big band into Hangar 1 to perform. They just want to show off to all those girls that have come to the dance.
I don't know why Lucky's our mascot dog. He's always chasing airplanes. I know Lucky's never going to catch one.
Yeah. Let's go back in and listen to the big band. I'm just going to drink. I'm not a dancer. You probably can dance better than I can.
We'll see.
Okay.
too bad you didn't go to Peterborough last night with John and I. When we were riding back to the base on the truck, Lieutenant Colonel Jimmy Stewart sat right next to me. He's the commanding officer of B-24 base number 124 here in England.
He's my favorite actor. I'm glad he won the Academy Award for Philadelphia's story. I'd have liked to have met him.
Men, we don't know what happened on the December 31st, 1943 raid on Cognac, France. Major Blaylock and Colonel Hatcher's B-17s were shot down. I am Major Mike Sadauskas, and I will be the base commander here at Polebrook.
I can't believe we lost Colonel Hatcher as commander. How unlucky to be on a mission, get shot down, and captured by Germans.
You want some chewing gum? Here, have some chewing gum.
Thanks.
Sure is really rotten luck. We end up with the meanest guy in the entire 8th Air Force, Major Mike Sadauskas. He's the same guy we had in training. Can you believe today when we aborted because Stoney had the bends, that Major Mike had the audacity to tell us never return from a mission, just put a parachute on the guy and throw him out of the plane? I can't believe that guy. I'll see you later. After one of our first missions, two of the guys had gotten in a fist fight over whether or not one of them had shot down a P-51 or a Messerschmitt. So now we had Major Sadauskas to train us some more on aircraft identification.
Men, we're going to be using captured enemy aircraft like the Ju-52 transport behind me here to increase your ability to identify friendly and enemy aircraft. This will definitely increase the likelihood that you'll survive on combat missions. We'll begin flying these into the airbase here at England shortly. Are there any questions?
Hey Rush, let's play a game of checkers.
Okay, but you're probably gonna beat me. Boy, isn't that Cookie a fantastic cook? I heard that he's got the best food in all of the European theater. Man, let's check out the radio and see if Axis Sally's on tonight. Ah, there she is.
Hello, American soldiers. This is Midge at the mic with Radio Berlin. You flyboys from the 351st with the Triangle J on the tail, we know you shot down some of our fighter planes. Hear your engines warming up? You'll be going out tomorrow, and we will get you then.
That Axis Sally, she's always trying to demoralize the troops. I heard she's from Portland, Maine.
What a traitor. She wasn't pretty anyway. Let's play some checkers.
Okay, you go ahead and move first. Doesn't matter, you're gonna probably beat me anyways. Okay.
Rush, what happened to you yesterday?
Well, yesterday I flew with the Nelson crew on a slow time training run over England. They got lost and we didn't get back to Polebrook till today.
I bet Lieutenant Nelson caught hell from the commander.
Yeah, I'm sure glad I didn't have to sit in on that debriefing.
Men, as you know, 4 of the Nelson crew were killed yesterday on their mission. Their co-pilot was killed instantly when a shell went through the cockpit window, and it also knocked out the pilot, Lieutenant Nelson. Several of the crew flew the crippled plane back to Polebrook. Lieutenant Trumper and Sergeant Matthews had everyone else bail out, and on their 3rd attempt at landing, crashed, and both men were killed instantly. And unfortunately, Lieutenant Nelson died at the base hospital this morning. They will receive the Medal of Honor for trying to save Lieutenant Nelson. The crew will also receive 1 Distinguished Service Medal, 1 Silver Star, and also 7 Purple Hearts. We will have an honor guard funeral tomorrow and the presentation of those medals.
Dear Dad and family, I can't believe they'd make us fly on Easter Sunday, but I guess there's a war going on. Last night I thought of home as usual. Naturally, I thought of it day and night. Sleep never came easy over here. I could hear the ground crews as they revved up the engines as though a mission was being planned. Tomorrow is Easter Sunday. Surely we won't go out to kill on Easter. We were awakened very early and a mission was to be flown all the way to Poland. To make sure that we had enough fuel, they had to put a special tank, known as a Tokyo tank, into the bomb bay, and we only used a half a load of bombs. Enemy fighters gave us a very hard time attacking frequently. We shot down 126 enemy planes. At one point, we were hitting our stabilizer and our plane zoomed up into the air. We were lucky that we didn't hit one of our other planes in the squadron. This was a very long day. We were weary, and when we landed back at Polebrook, we were very hungry. All we had was a candy bar and a cookie since breakfast, probably around 4:30 a.m. That's all we had to eat. Our stabilizer had a lot of damage to it, and we were lucky to complete the mission. Love, Elmer. The weather had broken over the continent, and we were really racking up the missions. We did 8 days in a row, and one day we did a double header over France. We were getting near our 25th mission, and General Eisenhower ordered all crews to fly 30 missions. Our next mission was going to be our 28th, and it was a real doozy. Something tragic happened that day. Buddy had to fly with another crew as their ball turret gunner because their ball turret gunner was sick. Buddy's plane was up ahead of mine, and I couldn't believe my eyes. The German fighter was shooting his B-17 to pieces. And then all of a sudden a 20mm cannon shell went right up through the ball turret. I knew Buddy was a dead man. Our ship number 835 had been so shot up that day that we borrowed a spare and flew air-sea rescue the next day. This did not count as a mission. We flew over the English Channel while the rescue boat was up in the North Sea. Sometimes they'd find a pilot adrift in a raft. Also, on that mission the day before when Buddy was killed, 2 men in another aircraft gotten their heads blown off over the Ruhr Valley when the nose of their plane took a artillery shell from the ground fire.
Buddy, I thought you were dead!
So did I.
I can't believe you survived that mission the other day. I was sure you got killed when that 20mm shell went up through the ball turret.
So did I. Well, we got hit in the number 2 engine by flak and oar covered my turret window. The pilot told me to get out the turret since I couldn't see anything. A moment later, a shell passed right through the seat where I was sitting. We were so badly shot out, we ditched into the North Sea and waited for rescue. The crew would tell you I was the first one out and the first one into the life raft.
June 5th, 1944. I went with a captain on a mission of mercy to pick up the B-17 with the nose shot off. I asked him, do I need my oxygen mask? No, not if you can breathe flying just above the treetops, he said. I'm going to buzz the field, Elmer. Let me know how it is. How is that? Well, if I was in the ball turret pointing the guns down, they now would be pointing back up because you would have scraped them on the ground. When we got down there, we were on the White Cliffs of Dover on the day before D-Day. I saw all this action, things going on, the build-up for the invasion. It was a real pretty day, June 5th. It was so nice and clear I could see all the way across to France, the Calais area. And I thought, if I can see over there, then the Germans can see us over here. The Germans could see all of this buildup going on. Ships out there. How we keep things a secret. The damaged B-17 was ready now, and it had been fixed up enough for us to fly it back to Polebrook. An officer came up and told us, forget you saw anything down here, it's top secret. Buddy, I just got back from the English Channel. I helped bring back another damaged B-17. I could see all the build-up for the invasion. The weather's so good I could see the French coast and the German installations. I don't know why that officer told us to keep what we saw a secret and forget everything that I saw down there.
Even your cousin Ray said last week that everybody knows the invasion is going to happen at any time. I sure hope he survives. I think thousands of those guys are going to get killed.
I think you're right. On the invasion day there's going to be thousands of men dying, but Ray told me he can take care of himself once he gets on dry land. He's already survived campaigns in Africa and Italy, and he's fighting with a real tough bunch of guys under General Patton. At briefing the next morning, they told us it was invasion day, June 6, 1944. We hit the pillboxes on the French coast, right on target at 0738, just before the boys landed. We were supposed to fly a second mission on D-Day, which would have been our 30th, and it was scrubbed. General Eisenhower then notified all flying personnel to continue flying indefinitely because of the emergency.
Sergeant Rushman, I received a telegram. I'm afraid I have some very bad news. Your cousin Ray was killed in combat about 100 miles outside of Hanover, Germany. I'm very, very sorry. There's your telegram.
Thank you, Major Sadowskis. Ray's dad was actually born in Hanover, Germany, and can't believe we just saw him before D-Day, and he survived the D-Day landings and gets killed. We're probably near the end of the war now.
It's a tough war.
It's going to be very hard on his mother. Thank you, sir. June 14th, 1944, our 33rd mission. The target was an airfield just outside of Paris, France. Flak was very accurate and plenty of it. We were sitting ducks flying at 12,000 feet approaching the target, and the strong headwind was against us. Our navigator said our ground speed was only 80 miles per hour. We were sitting ducks for the anti-aircraft gunners.
I got those two at 2 o'clock. Watch them, Scotty. I got my sights on.
Check that B-17, Chuck. 3 o'clock. Motor smoking. Fighter's 10:30 coming around.
Those 10:30 upper or lower?
We had to go around for a second run, and the headwinds were hindering our progress.
B-17 out of control at 3 o'clock.
Lamb got hit in the eye by flak, and the control cables were shot off, and our oxygen was shot out.
Come on, you guys. Get out of that plane. Bail out.
There's one. He come out of the bomb bay.
Yeah, I see him.
There's a tail gunner coming out.
Watch out for fighters. Keep your eye on them, Bill.
See any parachutes, Quinlan? 2 parachutes open.
Flag at 9 o'clock.
Cesarini, our co-pilot, who was flying the plane next to us, his engine too was shot up bad from flak and enemy fighters.
2 fighters, 6 o'clock up, coming in. Diving out, Chief. B-17 in trouble out at 2 o'clock, watching. Got an engine on fire.
And it was smoking, and they were starting to go down. We lost engine 3 and 4 from the flak.
They're coming in, Scotty.
Get that ball turret on them.
Save the ammunition as much as possible.
Watch that fighter coming in at 3 o'clock.
He's coming in a half roll. Pull her up, Chief. Pull her up.
Right after we released our bomb load, a 155mm shell exploded just under the open bomb bay doors, and our plane just totally lost control and started plunging towards the earth. We were all ready to bail out in the tail, but Razor never called for us to bail out. Now we were too low to bail out. Razor finally came across the intercom and said, "Throw out everything you can. I'm going to try to make it back to England, but I don't know if I'll have enough altitude to make it over to the cliffs of Dover." Cesarini's plane was trailing the squadron with us as we approached the English Channel. All of a sudden, Cesarini's B-17 just exploded. We knew no one could get out of that. We lost a good friend and a great co-pilot that day. We were hoping that we'd be able to clear the cliffs of Dover and make it back safely to base. Razor's a great pilot.
14, 15, 16, 17, 18. That's it. Well, it looks like Razor's and Cesarini's planes aren't coming back. I'll talk to the men and maybe see if they'd like to take some of their personal belongings to remember them by. That's it. Elmer, I just want to bring your stuff back. As you know, several of the tail gunners in the flight yesterday thought they saw your aircraft blow up. So you have evidently had told them that they could have some of your things, and I guess I thought you probably would like them back since you survived. I do have a question though too, Elmer. I noticed that your diary was still here. If something were to happen to you on a future mission, do you know what you'd like me to do with your diary?
Yeah, just you can take it and, you know, have the diary if anything happens, but it's really sad seeing Cesarini and his crew all killed so instantly yesterday. Thanks, Major, for bringing my stuff back.
You're welcome.
You know, you have any idea when we're going to be finished up with missions? That was our 33rd mission. I mean, they keep up in the missions. We first were supposed to do 25, and we got to 20, and they upped it to 30, and now we're at 29 on D-Day, and then we scrubbed the 30th mission. We would have been done on D-Day, and now they've got it fly until you're done flying. I mean, what's up with General Eisenhower? Have you heard anything?
Well, Elmer, as a veteran, I think you have a right to know there is a rumor that General Eisenhower is considering ending the missions at 30. You and several of your crewmates have flown 33, so you very well may be done. I will tell you, since you did witness the death of the gentleman who was your co-pilot for such a long time, I'm going to give all of you a 3-day pass, and then, you know, let's see what happens. You know, you very well may be finished flying combat missions.
Okay. Now, Cesarini gave me this calendar from New York City. He was from Brooklyn, the only member of our crew from a big city, and I just been marking the missions off as we do them. So we got 33rd one done.
And Elmer, hopefully that will be your last combat mission. I can't make you any promises, but again, as a veteran, man, seriously, thank you. And I'm glad that I was able to return your stuff to you.
Yeah. I can't believe I've survived 33 missions.
Hopefully this will be your last.
Okay, thanks, Major. Ah, buddy. What happened last night? All I can remember were those 2 English policemen's big fuzzy hats.
Elmer, you're the one that got us all on the bus and back to the base. That was great news when the MPs told us that 30 missions and we were done.
Ah, whose wallet is this? Oh, it was that drunk pilot. He's based over at one of the fighter bases near here. He thought I was the sober one in the group. I was drunker than anybody. I'm gonna have to borrow a bike and pedal over to his base and return him his wallet. You gonna play baseball with the guys?
Yeah, I'm heading that way as soon as I finish my coffee.
Okay. See you this afternoon. Glad they gave me a new canteen. That first mission we went on, I took the canteen up and it was 50 below zero and the darn thing got a crack in it and the water was frozen solid. I mean, unbelievable how cold it is up there on a mission. Buddy, don't tell anyone this, but the sergeant that wakes us up in the morning, he told me today to not be around the barracks when I usually am writing letters, to just get lost for an hour, because the pilot's got to go up for his 4 hours to get his flight pay, and he needs a radio man, and this guy's a really lousy pilot. Just don't tell anybody that the guy that wakes us up in the morning kind of warned me about it. You know, he's afraid something might happen to me if I go up with the guy, you know, when he's getting his flight time in. I can't believe that pilot lost 2 engines on takeoff and crashed and killed all 4 mechanics aboard, and the radio man was seriously injured. That sergeant that wakes us up in the morning might have saved my life yesterday. But Ed Matlock told me he's writing a diary like I've been writing about all of our missions, and his diary contains everything about the weather, you know, what B-17s get shot up, what don't return. His diary covers everything, and he said that he wanted me to take his diary if anything ever does happen to him on a training mission or something like that, when he's checking out the controls and the systems on B-17. So if anything happens to me, take my diary, and, you know, either Major Sadowskis is going to take it, or you take it and get it back to my father, okay?
Okay.
I think you had the closest call when that shell went through the ball turret. That was amazing that you were not in the turret and killed by that.
Did Edgy tell you about the 7 British airmen who were landing a captured German bomber and crashed and killed all 7 of them?
No, Ed didn't tell me about that, but he was telling me some other interesting incidents that have happened here at Polebrook. Like one day a mechanic was up on top of a B-17 and they were, the crew was on board and they were checking out all their guns and instruments, and the top turret gunner swung his guns around and the pilots had the engines running, testing the engines, and the mechanic was swept right off the top of the B-17 and the propeller killed him. Just awful, awful things have happened here. Training and maintenance crews getting killed and stuff. It's been a horrible war. Horrible long time over here.
Rush, I'm not waiting around a couple of months to take a boat to go back home. I want to get home as soon as I can.
Buddy, they want to fly you home in an old war-weary B-17. I didn't survive 33 missions just to crash in the Atlantic on the way home.
Elmer, your ship could be torpedoed by a German U-boat.
Buddy, there's no way that could happen. The Queen Elizabeth is too fast. A German U-boat could never set up and fire a torpedo and hit it.
Well, I'm leaving tomorrow, Elmer, on the next 17 out of Polebrook.
God bless you, buddy. I'll hope you get home safe, and I'll see you when I get home.
See you back in the States.
Finally, October 1st, 1944, I boarded the Queen Elizabeth in Southampton Harbor for a long 8-day trip home. As we leave the harbor, we pass by the silent cranes that built the Titanic many years before. Southampton, England is also where the Spitfire fighters were built. So many heroes had died. My best friend died on his way home. His B-17 crashed somewhere in the Atlantic. No wreckage of bodies were ever found. 1/3 of all the air crews trained were killed in this long war that I fought in. Almost everyone had a job on the ship. Mine was to be sergeant of the guard on a certain section. I was in charge of 12 men. This was an easy assignment. Some had KP. Rank didn't mean a thing. Our ship left the harbor at 23:15 hours on October 3rd. The second night out, we ran into a pretty bad storm. Waves were high and the ocean was rough. While on duty a few nights later, one of my men called for me saying that a man in one of the rooms was sick. When I seen him, I thought he was dead and called for the medics. The man was from Jamaica. He was one of the ship's workers. He did die and was buried at sea the next day, a military funeral. Very sad to see his body bound, and the tilted board started the weighted man to the deep water of the Atlantic. This was the first time that I had witnessed a burial at sea. A few days later we had an alert of an enemy submarine in the area, but I think it was a drill and a little excitement for us. During World War II, all ships at sea zigzagged across the ocean instead of a straight course. This was done so that we could distract the submarines and they couldn't torpedo us. On the morning of October 10th, 1944, we were told that we were getting close to New York Harbor. Eventually you could see the outline of the tall buildings. The weather was clear and warm. Unless it happened to you, there's no way that you could know the feeling of joy and happiness in your body to know that you have returned to America again. The many ships in the harbor blew their horns, seeing the Statue of Liberty and small towboats alongside to shove us up to the docks. At 14:15 p.m. we docked at Pier 92 on 51st Street. What a day to remember.
Come home, son.
I just want you to know that I was the one that put the proper curtains on the radio room window. We always said that you picked the radio room job because it was the safest place to be in a B-17. I put the curtains there so it could hide you from the flak and enemy fighters, which I always thought was kind of a joke because you were one of the bravest men over there in the Air Corps, because you shot down so many enemy fighters. The radio man would man the top turret gun, or sometimes the waist gun or ball turret. By the way, Elmer, I did not put the dead rattlesnake under your cot at gunnery school in Texas. Buddy did it. He was the only one of us that didn't mind the snakes. Elmer, did that pilot that borrowed $75 from you ever pay you back? He said the day he left for home to tell you that he would mail it to you.
No, and he sat right next to me last night at dinner. I can't believe he never mentioned the fact that he still owed me $75 after 30 years.
Elmer, you always loaning out money to guys playing poker.
Yeah, they all paid it back except for that pilot, but I guess it was worth $75 to know him. One of the guys actually called his wife up, and she dragged him down to the tavern I was at in San Francisco when I was on the Air Transport Command, and she made him give me the $20 back that he owed me. Most of the guys paid me back over in Polebrook, a few days after I loaned it to them, and they got their paycheck and had some money again.
Elmer, I'd like to make a toast to the real heroes that never made it home, and to us, a long overdue toast. Welcome to the Lucky Bastards Club.
To the Lucky Bastards Club. It's too bad you're going to miss out tomorrow. There's going to be a reporter here asking us about our war stories, and you're going to miss the big gala. You were one of the best dancers and drinkers in World War II.
Well, I got to work tomorrow, and I don't have to listen to other people's war stories anyways. You take care, and I'll see you next year, Elmer.
Yeah. Thanks for coming to the first reunion.
Mr. Lamb, can you tell us some of your memories of the war?
I just want to mention how calm Elmer was during a heated battle. We would fly for more than 10 hours at a time and experience maybe 10 minutes of hell. On one occasion, one of our missions, I had flak blown through my waist gun window, and I started screaming. That knocked me down, and Razor, the other pilot, sent Elmer back to see how I was doing, and he seen that I wasn't bleeding, so he occupied my waist gun position at the window until I calmed down. After our 33rd mission, we went to London on a 3-day pass. The crew needed a break. Our crew pilot, Sisterini, was killed piloting a plane next to us, which blew up. It happened to have a full bomb load on board. Our plane got shot up from enemy planes in flak that we almost had to bail. We had to throw out all of our guns, radios, extra clothing, anything we could just to stay airborne. Razor did an excellent job getting us back to an emergency landing field at Tegmere. When we were on our leave in London, we were outside a pub, and we had several MPs come up to us and asked us how many missions we've flown. We told them 33, and they came up to us and said that anybody with over 30 missions is going home. So I think we drank every drop of liquor in the pub that night. We had a really good time. Hey Elmer, did you ever get your stuff back after the final mission?
Yeah, I told those guys they could have my stuff if I got killed. The tail gunners of the B-17s ahead of us saw the explosion at Cesarini's plane and thought it was our plane.
Mr. Rushman, did you ever find out who the fighter pilot was that shot down 4 German planes?
Yes, quite a few years after the war, I was talking to a friend of mine in town, and he was a repairman for the fighter squadron over near my base, and we looked up in his records that he kept in a diary that Dale Spencer was the guy that shot down 4 German planes that day and saved the squadron. Well, I contacted the city building in Clymer, New York, where he was from, and they said he moved out to California. So I wrote to the address that I found in California, and about a week later, Dale Spencer wrote back and said, "I'm your man." Well, that was great and stuff, and a little while later, I got a call a few weeks later from the post office in town, and he said, "There's a guy here named Dale Spencer in a motorhome that wants to meet with you." And so the motorhome wouldn't fit my driveway, and so I went down there and met with Dale, and we had lunch and talked about it. I mean, he probably saved a lot of bomber crews that day. So it was quite something. He shot down 9.5 German planes overall, flying P-47 Thunderbolts and the P-51 Mustang.
How many of your crew survived the war?
8 of my crew survived the war. Cesarini became a pilot for another crew, and he was killed on our 33rd and last mission when he was flying right next to us and some flak hit engine 2 on his plane, and it was a full bomb load and it blew up right next to us. And as the plane disintegrated from the explosion, there was one of the guys that had bailed out, and he was floating down to earth safely and thought he's going to survive the explosion, and a piece of burning wing fell on his parachute and killed him. So none of the crew in Cesarini's bomber survived, and the other person from my crew that died didn't actually die in combat, but it was my best friend Buddy. I told him to, come home on one of the ships with me, and it'd be safer, because some of these war-weary B-17s, they were sending them home and they just crash into the Atlantic, and that's what happened to Buddy. So 8 of our actual original crew survived the war.
Mr. Rushman, do you keep in touch with anybody else you knew during the war?
Yeah, I still keep in touch with Henry, our friend that was a tail gunner out of Italy. He flew 27 missions during the war, and Buddy and I had met Henry on a layover in Cincinnati. He worked for American Airlines at Lunken Airport back before the war, and then after the war in 1947, American actually moved over to northern Kentucky, which was a bigger airfield than Lunken, and they turned it into a commercial airport in 1947. It had been used earlier during the war as a military base for B-17s.
What was the first thing you did when you got back to America?
The first thing I did when I got off the Queen Elizabeth in New York City was to drink 2 bottles of milk from the Smiling Hill Farm in Maine. For over a year in England, you couldn't get milk to drink, so I saved one of the bottles that I drank out of when I got home.
Mr. Razor, why did Knockabout have a picture of Bugs Bunny wearing boxing gloves?
My favorite story is about naming our first B-17 Knockabout. We even had a picture of Bugs Bunny in boxing gloves, painted on the nose, and even on our jackets too. First we were going to name it something kind of nasty, but Elmer said, fellas, if you name it something nasty, I don't even want to be on it. It's bad enough being shot at in the sky. I don't want to have to be shot at in the plane with a nasty name on it. So we named it Knockabout, and Elmer stayed on the crew. Well, see, originally Knockabout was called Wanna Spar, like a boxer, because one of the guys on our crew was a Golden Glove boxer. We flew in a lot of different B-17s. I can't remember them all. There was like 15 or 16 of them. There was Anatole, there was Gremlin's Castle, there was Slowball, Chatterbox, there was the Duchess. That was the same plane that Clark Gable flew on 5 different missions before we had it. And Little Ginny, and Devil's Mistress, Trade Winds. There was a bunch of them.
So whatever happened to Knockabout?
Well, the Knockabout was used on the Aphrodite mission, which was when they developed a radio-controlled B-17, which was loaded with explosives. Jimmy Doolittle, the famous Doolittle raid pilot from the Tokyo raid, was an observer on the Knockabout mission that day. Doolittle flew a P-51 to see how the test would work out. He flew alongside. The radio man bailed out, and the pilot stayed on board a little too long to keep the Knockabout level flight, and the plane prematurely blew up. He was killed, and it was the same thing that happened to Joe Kennedy. Hey, since we're in Boston for the first reunion of our bomb group, decided to go ahead and get you a replacement hat for that one that the drill instructor took away on the first day of boot camp.
Thanks. I wore that hat every day. Thank you very much. Ted Williams, he was the best player of all time.
Major Mike, why do you think the air crews at Polebrook didn't like you?
Even after 30 years, it's kind of tough to do this, but I guess I feel like I do kind of need to apologize to the men here for the way I treated them, but it was the Second World War. I came in and I replaced a very well-liked Colonel Hatcher. He was obviously well-respected by his men, but you know, in retrospect, when you look back at this, we still could have lost the war to the Germans. The losses were so high at that time that there was serious consideration being given to ending precision daylight bombing. So it was a very difficult time, and I particularly remember once coming into the room to give a briefing to the men, and I told them that if any of their crewmen were seriously wounded or became ill, that they were not to abort their mission. I advised them that they should put a parachute on their crewman and toss him out of the plane, hoping that someone on the ground would pick him up and give him treatment. It's kind of tough, you know, even now to look back on this, but the thing is, you know, again, as a commander's view, we had a flight of B-17s, each of them having 10 machine guns on them, and each of those machine guns was designed to protect the flight. And in my view, one man was expendable for the sake of the mission and all the other lives. So again, it's very difficult, and I, you know, with all the guys here, I'd kind of like to say that, you know, I wish I had been different, but maximum effort was required, and that's what I expected of you. And you know, frankly, guys, you delivered, and that's why we're sitting here, the victors in that terrible war.
Paige, you were only 5 years old when these guys arrived in Polebrook in 1943. What do you remember?
I'll never forget Christmas in 1943. The American airmen made it so memorable for us because we didn't have much money for food or any really for gifts. And the bomber crews, they just made it so special. They put together a Christmas party for us at their bases in England. I was 5 years old then, and I've kept in touch with Elmer ever since. This will be my first trip to America to join their first reunion.
Mr. Gwynn, can you tell us some stories of your being a navigator or other experiences during World War II?
I can't believe how easily some navigators got lost. Elmer, your friend Henry from Kentucky that worked for American Airlines at Lunken, had a terrible navigator. On the way to his base in Italy, the navigator took them over restricted airspace at Norfolk Naval Air Station. They saw flak before ever going on a combat mission, and a P-51 had to escort them out of restricted airspace. Another interesting story about Henry's navigator was when he argued with their pilot as to whether or not they'd passed Iceland. Boy, I'm glad the pilot won that argument, or they would have run out of fuel and crashed right into the Atlantic. I don't even know how Henry's navigator passed navigation school. No clue. 4 of us flew for the Air Transport Command when we got home from Europe. We first got a month off to see our families and then reported back to our Montana base to fly new bombers to the Pacific Theater. But that is a whole different story.
Well, thank you for the interview. I guess you guys really were small town heroes.
Well, guys, it's getting late. He's going. It's been nice seeing you all again.
Well, I want to make a toast before you leave. I want to toast to the real heroes that never came home, Buddy and Cesarini, and toast also to us that made it out of the war alive. We're now members of the Lucky Bastards Club.
To the Lucky Bastards.
Lucky Bastards Club.
Bombs away.
Hope to see you next year at the 2nd annual reunion. Thanks for coming, guys.